I noticed just there on the wall, if it's still up, the picture which some years ago I gave to Alan, and that is the picture which, in a sense, has frozen history. Things happened in that short space of geography, in space and time, which has an effect on all time. One time I was with you in Medjugorje, and it was 1995, the summer thereof, and we had with us Eddie Stones, and he was praying over us, and he could see things. And towards the end of his prayer, he saw very clearly a few things. At that time, I was still attached to Kilnacrot, which was crumbling at the time, and he could see this big black cross over me. There was some big pain coming, obviously, but then he saw, and this is the bit which links with that picture, he saw a door, the door of a church, opening. Very shortly after that, things unfolded. It was a very unclear period, but then this letter came out of the blue, hinting strongly to go and visit that monastery. And there I went, and things again very quickly just happened, which could have not happened, but actually unhappened had I not listened at that point. I wasn't a priest, remember, and that's the important bit. Things just happened through providence. But then, other things happened as well. One day, I was there, and I heard the story of this young man, who actually was a young priest. He came into that church, and when he got into the church, he didn't hear a voice, but he felt very strongly this coming to him. Questa è casa mia. This is my home. He just came into the church and he knew that was home. Well, something similar happened to quite a few who came into that church. It was strange, but it was just a place where somehow things happened. Confessions actually by the 100. For instance, at Easter we had about 600 young people staying under tents every year, sometimes more, each wanting confession. And all the elderly people as well. Therefore you're handling confessions by the 100. And things also would happen with regard to producing beauty and diffusing it. They were capable in winter of putting microphones in it, and because of the perfect medieval acoustic, and we were all young, they were all younger than I were, except for the prior, we were able to diffuse the beauty of the Benedictine chant around the world. So it was only a small part of geography, but things would move from there, including also publication, because they were also printing books. And then it came to realizing you're there, and things can happen or not happen if. Well, it was uncertain in the first month, but then something happened which was quite unexpected. The prior gave me the sort of brochure they had, which was published a few times a year, with news, and on it was this picture amongst others. It was my next door neighbour, Frère Dominique, on the ground, with his arms actually in cross form, before the high altar. What was going on? He was about to be ordained a deacon. And as I looked on that, something inside me whispered, don't do anything, just carry on, and that will be you down the line. It was only a small nudge, but it made all the difference. And then, because very quickly they made me sacristan, I was handling the high altar. the altar which we were still using, by the way, facing the other way, except on a Sunday, and with incense every day, all with Latin chant, the chant that the building was made for and used to, and echo perfectly well. So there on the altar, again, that was coming to me on a daily basis. Don't do anything, just carry on. And eventually you will be on this altar celebrating what was celebrated there since the Middle Ages and earlier. It was founded in 781, not 1781, 781, and the crypt underneath was still down there, and we used it for prayer. And up on top of it was the second altar where we were taught to celebrate how and when and so on, all the formula we were taught in Latin and whatever, and there we would celebrate our first masses as well. So all this was in one small part of geography, which was linking us to ancient history, because on the walls of the old chapel were frescoes of St. Benedict's life, which is why I come into this evening. The story was there. He was a young man in his teens in Rome, and he was worked upon by grace, for he saw that there was corruption amongst the young people, and he wanted to be free. He felt a call, and he fled. He found his way to the place which now is Subiaco, it means Sublaku, under the lake, and he lived there quietly. It would seem he had some contact initially with some monks, but he chose to live quietly, hidden in a grotto, and he was known only to one monk, St. Romanus, who would lower his bread on a cord. And that was all in these frescoes on the wall, including this scene, that one day the devil wanted to do away with him. He was getting too high in the spiritual life, so he wanted him to die of starvation. So you can see the devil in the fresco cracking the bell at the end of the cord on which the bread was suspended. So he did not know that the bread had been lowered, and he was getting more and more hungry. Eventually it was made known to another monk somewhere else that this young monk was dying of hunger, and they broke through and found him there, and it was Easter morning, and he did not know it was Easter morning. That was the degree of his seclusion. Eventually they asked if he would be their guide. He was quite severe, and it seems that he was too severe for their liking, and they tried to poison him, but he made the sign of the cross over the cup, and it shattered, and he saw it was poisoned. He went away and eventually settled in what has become the Holy Mount, Monte Cassino, where he eventually wrote his rule under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the rule which made Europe what it is, which explains why he is our patron as the patron of Europe. It was a rule which gave a template for all the Benedictine monasteries of the world. Hence you go to any one and you will see certain things coming through. The structure of the office, the divine office, is clearly laid out, but also certain characteristics which one does find over the Benedictine world. But he also did give this possibility of being useful to society, for they took on what had to be done, and with time that did include a lot of copying manuscripts and of teaching. The young people, the alumni, the little boys, would be given over, who would eventually often become monks as well. So it had, with the centuries, a huge effect of diffusion of culture, truth, light, and actually even medicine, because they were centre of cultures on every level. This then was our Europe. Now I want to zoom into one specific area which we can take with us. What is one of the things that one sees in the Benedictine culture? It is order. St. Benedict has a very strong line on the nature of the monastery as the whole being the Domus Dei, the house of God. That is, the whole monastery is sacred, and peace and silence must be felt there. And all the monastery must have the order which one gives to God. That is cleanliness, dignity, and tacitudinitas, silence, where God is met everywhere. There is no compartment which does not belong to God, and no moment of the day which does not belong to God. Hence all is dignified. Now, that is kind of important. If one opts to spend one's entire life in the Domus Dei, in the house of God, extended, then one is with the angels. One is living in good company. One is also going inwards rather than outwards. Switch off from conversation, what will happen? There will be no leakage. Energy is not going all over the place. One is starting to engage with an invisible friend and seeking consolation in him. One is also picking up what he is hinting, which one is not doing if one is emitting syllables. It's an inward life and not an outward life. It's a big difference over a whole life. Indeed, one day, it's actually in France, I was asked to prepare a meditation, a study on silence. And it was something which, looking at the documents, was a very profound issue. Because if one leaves noise behind, I mean unnecessary words, unnecessary engagement with the dynamics of conversation, simplicity enters in. Life is not multiplex, folded, bent in different directions, but simplex, folding in one direction and channeling in one direction for one's energy. Much life is complicated. Much life is, if you like, diversified, distracted, and therefore weakened in intensity. You spend a day talking all the time, taking in messages all the time, even artificially, the radio, the television, incessant communication on the mobile phone, texting, conversations. Then, if one looks at the day and analyzes the dynamics of the soul, that soul is not in itself. That soul is given to other people's souls. That soul is contaminated. That soul is living in other souls and is interchanging with things outside itself all the time. All the time. Some are willed because we have to be courteous and kind. Others are our own doing, and that's the bit we can adjust. And as regards the others, we can actually limit them and simplify them. We don't have to accept all the invitations. They're big choices, giving an evening, a day to something rather than something else. Do we pray before making those decisions? The correct answer might be, I need to bring that to the Lord. I need to pray about that before actually saying yes, yes, yes. It's just so easy. It makes a big difference with regard to where our energy is going. The other is linked. If one looks at the dynamics inside the soul that is continuously weakened by engaging with other souls, other messages, other words, that soul is suffering. A soul that is continuously having to handle issues, and that's what they are, is all the time handling pain. That soul is having to limit the damage of what's coming at it all the time. That soul might go through life without its own individuality. It may not be able, after a while, to bear just being without other people's thoughts. The proof is, what does that soul do when at last alone? Will it actually go into interior mode? Will it go into prayer mode? Will it open the scriptures? Or will it simply open the mobile phone or the computer? What do many people do in our society now? The first minute they're alone, they fire up. And there they are, plugged again, once again, into other dynamics. And if you don't believe what I say, analyze yourself. It's actually addictive. internet is addictive. It's a modern addiction, and it's dangerous because we don't notice what's happening. It is the reality. It has become more real than what is actually inside ourselves. We are not actually ourselves when in front of a powerful screen. We are on loan. And we are open also to what is in there, including demons. Now, this has become a new problem in the monastic world, because whereas when I was young, the monastic cell was the cell of the desert. There was nothing there and no one had access to it. It was genuinely silence and solitude, and one did one's Lectio Divina kneeling and so on in that cell before an icon. It was genuinely the place where one had intimacy with Jesus Christ, the stars of the soul. Analyze now many a situation in a house of prayer, and what have you got? They may have access to internet in their cell, therefore email, therefore Facebook, therefore all the modern means of communication on internet. They may also have a mobile phone, therefore that may ring. They may have also texts on it. They may even have a smartphone. They will also have access probably to the outgoing phone line, that is the main telephone, coming also into their cell. They will also probably have access to the front door in modern means of communication, therefore available for anyone who calls. They will also therefore be called to that front door to answer all kinds of things. So analyze the day of a person now in what is actually meant to be the desert, and it's anything but the desert. And it's extremely dangerous, to the extent now that modern monasteries have had to wrestle with it and sometimes make clear guidelines, e.g. the number of hours, not minutes, but hours that they may spend on internet. A new modern congregation in the States has actually laid down in their constitutions that the very maximum any of the brethren will be allowed to have access to internet in one day is 4 hours. We think it's a lot, but they know what reality is. So if that's the case for a monastic situation, what is it going to be for the average person who is not aware of what is out there and what order is in the day, which is where I want to land. Is our day in control? It's a big question. Are we ordering our proportion? Because if one looks at how time is going over 24 hours, I am horrified sometimes to see how much time is going into things which are not helpful. Much time in Ireland goes into conversation which is not particularly useful to the soul. Amongst men, it's very often long analysis of football matches. Amongst women, it can be, well, you know what it might be, but they are quite talkative. So what is the elevation of the soul unless one is with people of prayer? But it's time out of control. I just want to finish. One time, with my parents, I was visiting different places in Italy and also Greece. I was 18 at the time, and in Italy I was struck by one place in particular. It was where St. Benedict and his sister, St. Scholastica, had been buried, the crypt of Monte Cassino, which had escaped the damage of the bombardment of the war because it was so low down. That was very moving, St. Benedict. The other was further on in Greece, Meteora. It was these perpendicular rock formations which were almost miracles of construction, because on the top of them, way up, were monasteries still standing. And in the time when they were constructed, the only way up after they were constructed was in a basket. And the basket was heaved up on this system manually, and apparently to discourage people from going there too much, the cord was only replaced when it broke. So they knew what separation meant. And we happened to be there on the Feast of the Transfiguration, coming up now, 6th of August, and I was very moved timing that day, that monastic mountain, on the day when the Lord had done the same on Mount Tabor. And those words were coming to me. He led them to a high place apart. And when they got there, what was their experience? There was ecstasy, there was heaven touching earth, and there was this invitation, listen to him. And praying there in a monastic chapel, right up on that high rock of sanctity, it hit me. This is what it's about. Leave the world behind. When one is close to heaven like this, with only incense and icons in the air and little lamps burning, one sees the effort involved in leaving the world behind. If we think we can do it with shortcuts, we've got another thing coming. We need not less but more effort than our forefathers today to find that pax Benedictina which characterizes a monastery. We can't live without peace in our soul, and we damage our peace by too much complication. One word in the void has an echo. Many words are not heard because we switch off. But the most delicate voice of all is that of the Lord. And if we want to hear it, we have to do the groundwork. Guided to know that we are in the will divine, that we are turning with the cogs and wheels of vast gradated order, that the whine of happenings engaged in fact reveals the act of one deep thinker. This, and this alone, can make to resonate again the song of earth within the depths that miss harmonics of lost joys. None can regain. For we were happy in the simpleness of yeses all untied. And to return to thee and thee alone, with emptiness that can alone be filled. This is to learn the meaning of the world. For here we are the flotsam of a moment from afar.